Today, approximately 417,000 people have signed military service contracts. In addition, over 36,000 citizens have joined volunteer units and gone to the Special Military Operations Zone. The impressive results that we have achieved were made possible, above all, through the unwavering patriotism of our citizens, who voluntarily decided to dedicate themselves to military service. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to them for their service.
A new warning signal is emerging from Moscow as Russia reports a sharp surge in military recruitment. Hundreds of thousands have now signed contracts, while thousands more have volunteered for deployment. The announcement comes amid growing alarm across Europe, where leaders increasingly warn that Russia may be preparing for a wider confrontation. Russia says its armed forces are growing fast. According to Deputy Security Council Chairman Dmitry Medvedev, around 417,000 people have signed military service contracts so far, with more than 36,000 additional volunteers joining units sent to the zone of what Moscow calls its special military operation. Medvedev made the announcement during a Security Council meeting focused on recruitment. He praised those who enlisted, calling their decision an act of patriotism that strengthened Russia's military readiness at a critical moment. The figures come as European leaders repeatedly warn that Russia may be preparing for a broader conflict beyond Ukraine. Some officials have suggested that Moscow could eventually turn its attention toward NATO territory, claims the Kremlin strongly denies. Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed those accusations directly last week during his annual press conference in Moscow. Speaking for more than 4 hours, Putin rejected the idea that Russia intends to attack Europe. Putin argued that NATO's own security strategies contradict the alarmist rhetoric. He pointed to the United States National Security Strategy released under President Donald Trump, which does not list Russia as a direct adversary. Quote, "How can NATO prepare for war with Russia?" Putin asked, "if its main member does not consider us an enemy?" He singled out NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte for what he described as exaggerated claims about Russian aggression.
In NATO's security and national security strategies, Russia is not designated as an enemy or as a target, but the NATO Secretary General is preparing us for war. What is this supposed to be? Do you even know how to read? How can you claim that NATO is aiming for war with Russia if NATO's main country doesn't consider us an opponent or an enemy? European political elites supported the Democratic Party, Ms. Harris, in the United States presidential elections. They did so quite straightforwardly, if not brazenly. And yet Trump was once accused of Russia interfering in those elections. Nothing was ever confirmed. All the investigations conducted in Congress ultimately led to nothing. There was no cooperation, no Russian interference at all. However, the political elites of Europe did interfere, and quite directly. They still, I believe, expect that after the midterm elections for the US Congress next autumn, the political landscape will shift somewhat and their traditional allies will emerge, enabling them to exert greater pressure on President Trump. That is why they are acting in this way, in anticipation of changes in the political landscape of the United States ahead of the congressional elections. We are going to eliminate these threats, and everyone must clearly understand this and be fully aware of the fact that actions of this nature will simply lead to an unprecedented escalation of the conflict, taking it to a completely different level and expanding it into a full-scale armed confrontation.
Earlier this week, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte issued one of the starkest warnings yet, saying Europe could become Russia's next target unless the alliance rapidly expands its defense capabilities.
If Putin got his way, Ukraine under the boot of Russian occupation, his forces pressing against a longer border with NATO, and a significantly increased risk of an armed attack against us. It would require a truly gargantuan shift in our deterrence and defence. NATO would have to substantially increase its military presence along the eastern flank. And allies would have to go much further and faster on defence spending and production. In such a scenario, we would long for the days when 3.5% of GDP on core defence was enough. We need to be ready. Because at the end of this first quarter of the 21st century, conflicts are no longer fought at arm's length.
The sharply different messages highlight a growing divide. NATO officials say military preparedness is essential to deter aggression. Moscow insists the West is inflating threats to justify military expansion and political pressure. As recruitment numbers climb and rhetoric hardens on both sides, Europe finds itself watching closely, caught between Russia's assurances and NATO's warnings, with the future of continental security increasingly uncertain.